Welcome into another edition of Mix in a Water Monday. Joining us today is former Gamecock tight end Jacob August. And Jacob, let's just get straight to it. Gamecocks, after having a great performance a week ago against Florida off the bye week, they come out against Missouri. They did do some good things early in the game at times, despite some of those turnovers. But unfortunately, they just didn't show up for it seemed like two quarters. And then they were able to make a late rally in the fourth. What did you see in that first half, though, with the inconsistencies?
I think you saw a little bit of a hangover, after that big win over Florida. I don't think anybody expected us to play as well against Florida as we did. So, going into the weekend, going into the new week, they were they were definitely still thinking about that last week against Florida. So, you saw that in the first half. But like you said, I mean, what you gotta look at with this football team is not about the results, but how are they responding to adversity. And what happened in the second half, where they came back and they ended up losing by 3, and they were one stop away from winning that football game, or having a chance to win the football game. That's the things that I'm looking for. That's the things that the former players are looking for. So, um, if you went into the game, if you went into the season, uh, thinking that we were gonna be fighting for a sixth win, I'm sorry. If you would have told me that we were fighting for a sixth win at in the 10th game of the year, I would have told you that you're crazy. So, yes, it's a little bit frustrating, but also at the same time, I think we're in a better place than we anticipated us being. So
And,
it
and
is
you
what
know
it
there's
is.
and you know there's going to be people that look at it. They're tired of the moral victories. They just want to be able to get results, and I think we all understand that. When you go back to the transition when Will Muschamp took over, and then that second season being able to go to the Outback Bowl, what was that difference though between year one and year two? Obviously, we're still in year one right now. South Carolina still has an opportunity to be able to be bowl eligible. They have to either beat Auburn this upcoming week, or they're going to have to take care of Clemson at home. But what did you see change? Because I think some things we hear, all the cliche words, right? Culture and being able to have guys buy in, all those just cliches we hear in terms of
Mhm.
just someone trying to get this a program to turn around when it comes to not just football, but for any collegiate sport for that matter. What needs to happen in order for that success to happen at USC?
Well, the biggest thing with us from year 1 to year 2 is we just had a bunch of dogs. I mean, we had Sky Moore, Hayden, Brian, Debo, Shy. I mean, we had so many ball players that just Dante. We had so many guys out there that were just like, no matter what the situation is, they were gonna go get their own. So, I think for year 1, it was just such a big transition for us that we felt like we were, fighting for air the whole time. And then that second season, we kinda got acclimated with the coaching style with Muschamp, and a lot of guys that stepped up, they were older guys, so they had that leadership, they had that experience. I think with the program now, um, I think there is gonna be a big jump. Um, I think that, like I said, the intangibles are what we're looking for, and what not just me, but a lot of former
Mm-hmm.
players, and it's what we're seeing. We're seeing we're seeing things that we didn't see in the years previous. We're seeing a bunch of adversity, and then we're seeing how our players are reacting to it. I mean, Brown is a hell of a quarterback, and he should be. We all know by now he should have been playing a lot more than what he has. But like at the end of the day, he's our third string quarterback. When you
But
go
what do
into
you
the
like?
season,
What do you like about him? Because I think some people look at it, it's like, all right, he's able to give probably a little bit more with his legs because of the injury that Luke Doty has. We know that he wasn't himself this season.
mhm.
There's no two ways about it. But what have you enjoyed the most being able to see Brown? Obviously, this past game, it was tough to really do anything. It just seemed like the offensive line had struggles, and not just the offensive line, but blocking as a whole.
Well, I mean, he has experience. He has college football experience, and granted, it's
Hmm.
D3 football, but it's still college football. And you immediately saw that when you played against Florida. I think when you look at the 3 quarterbacks that played this year, you got Luke Doty. We all know who Luke Doty is, and we all know he's gonna be a really good player, and he's special, but he needs more time to develop, and he's gonna continue to grow, and he's gonna continue to be a hell of a ball player, but that takes a lot of time. And you look at Zeb. I mean, Zeb is I was always very excited about Zeb, and I really liked watching him play. I thought he's a hell of a game manager, but again, reality of it is he came here to be a coach, and you saw that when, the first time. And again, I'm a former player too, and I can attest to it.
Hmm.
And it would have been the same for me if I was done playing football and then I went 4 months without even touching a football field, without running. Like, it's gonna take me a long time to, like, not only physically get ready, but mentally. And I think that that kind of weighed on him because he started off so strong because it was like, oh, I'm just going to play football, and it started off strong, but then like you got to be mentally prepared and you got to be mentally
And he did,
conditioned.
and he did have the opportunity to play spring football. But even though the
Yeah,
season was a little condensed, I mean, shoot, it's like the WNBA in a sense. I mean, you just play
right,
one full season with college basketball, you get drafted, and then you go into another season
right,
again. So I can't even imagine how banged up you are at that point. But I
right.
do want to ask you this though. You know, there are games I think back to when you played, whether it be, you know, and I always don't put it just on the offensive line. And I know from a tight end standpoint, there's plenty of times where you're attached and you're blocking as well. If there were games in which you guys weren't able to block that great, what do you
Mhm.
think is going on this week? What can you do? Because we hear the word tweak sometimes. You're not going to be able to just throw out the entire playbook at this point. What can South Carolina do to be able to make improvements going into that Auburn game? And what do you recall from just the past and how you guys try to handle situations like that if you didn't have a game in which you guys blocked well?
Well, in terms of blocking, the number one thing in terms of having a crappy week of blocking and then going in and having a good week of blocking is your mindset.
Mhm.
All blocking is your desire to want to block. If you don't want to block, you're not going to block. If you want to block, then you're going to figure out a way to get it done. And I'm not saying that those offensive linemen don't want to block because we know they do. But when you were with Coach Wolford for 4 or 5 years and you have a certain style and you have a certain scheme that you're so used to having, and then you have you basically pull the plug and then a new coach comes in and he's giving you a completely different scheme. What you're doing is you're thinking and you're not doing. So when they've been thinking so much, when you're thinking about the scheme, you're not thinking about blocking. And in order to be a good blocker, you have to say, hey, there's a can I curse on this? No. There's a
Oh yeah.
dude, there's a motherfucker on the other side of that field, on the other side of that line. He's trying to get behind me and I'm trying to go through him. Either he's going to get to the quarterback or I'm going to go through him. And you have to make sure that every play that doesn't happen. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But you have to have that dog in you to be able to say that I'm not going to let this dude get the better of me. I'm going to get the better of this dude. So I think that Eric Douglas, Gwen, I think Wonham, I think they all have that dog in them,
Yeah.
and if you ask them, they would say the same thing, and I really do think that they do. They just got to get to that point of learning the scheme and being able to do things without thinking. And I think once they get to that point, and that's what we talked about with the jump from year one to year two. Once they get that jump to year two, those guys are going to be thinking a little less and they're going to be able to play football more. And so that's when it goes back to the intangibles where, listen, we won a game we weren't supposed to win. We beat Florida, we weren't supposed to beat them, okay? We lost to Missouri and we shouldn't have lost to them, right? You're going to have these up and downs in year one as a new coach. But what we're looking for is how are they handling adversity, and they're handling adversity well. And that's what makes us as former players more excited about, going in the next season. Whatever happens this year happens.
Mhm.
You know, what at the end of the day, you're either going to win the game or lose the game. But how is this first year going to jumpstart you into the next year? And that's kind of like what we're going to really see with the and how we're going to determine how the Shane Beamer era goes.
And obviously, Wandham did play a good portion of the year. Unfortunately, he's done now for the season. But I mean, for the most part, you returned 4 of the 5 offensive linemen to start the year. What would you tell people? And I know sometimes it's not as easy to be able to point at one or two things, especially when you're on the outside, regardless if you played for a program, because like you said, there's new coaching staff. When you look at what's going on there, because people are going to ask, okay, we talk about maybe they haven't been able to pick this up, or they're thinking a little bit too much and not just being able to play. At this point of the year, there's going to be people on the outside saying, why haven't they been able to figure that out? Why haven't they been able to get to the point? What would you explain to those people who have not been on that other side in a situation like you have?
Yeah, I mean, it's a football team is just like a company. I mean, you don't just go into a company that's struggling and immediately change everything in one day, and then everything's all sunshines and rainbows. It's a very long process. You have to take there's many factors in a program. There's culture, there's skill set, there's strength, there's belief, there's nutrition, there's all these things that have to come into play and have to add up in order for things to go well. And it takes a long time. I mean, it's an extended process. It doesn't just happen overnight. So we didn't hire Shane Beamer for 1 year. We hired Shane Beamer to change our program to make things right again, like how Spurrier had it. We believe that he can do that. But if you judge someone's career off of their first year when they're just basically handed the keys to an old car, they want to make everything the way they want to, and that takes a long time. It takes recruiting classes. It takes people. He probably, again, I'm not on the inside, but
Mhm.
just like any other business or any other company, he probably hired people that he might not like right now, because they might, he might have hired them and he thought they were going to be a certain way and they might not be, right? So he's going to have to wean through those, and he's going to have to find somebody else to, fill those roles. And once he does, if they mesh well, they communicate well within the coaches, they communicate well to the players, they communicate well to the parents, they communicate well to the fans, right? Then you start seeing things start to change. And we saw that last week with Florida. Things are starting to change a little bit, right? Now we
Mhm.
took a down step because with Missouri, but again, as long as we continue to see things get back to the natural, progression. Like right now we're here, we got to get back up. We got to keep going. Then things are going to work itself out, and I believe that things will work itself out because we hired Shane Beamer to change the program. The program's going to take a little while to change, but I believe it's going in the right direction.
With so many distractions that could possibly be out there in terms of knowing that you're one win away from becoming bowl eligible. We know that Shane Beamer and some of the players talked about it last week, saying that it was addressed at the beginning of the week and then we kind of flushed it and we pushed it aside and we were focused on the task at hand. With that all being said, you understand in this state what that South Carolina Clemson game means. That, of course, is on the other side of
Hmm.
this week's game against Auburn. How do you push that to the side? Because as you get closer and closer, I mean, shoot, I've only been covering the Gamecocks for 6 seasons, but it seems like as you get closer and closer, it's like an oven.
Hmm.
And it just keeps cranking up with that heat. You start feeling it, you start hearing it around campus. Maybe students are starting to tell it to you a little bit more, like, hey,
Right.
beat them in 2 weeks. How do you make sure that that does not become a distraction this week because you have an unbelievable opportunity again at home against someone that you know pretty well with Mike Bobo, the old offensive
Yeah.
coordinator coming into town? How do you make sure you don't let next week be a distraction this week?
Yeah. So there's a few things that I took away from Muschamp, and the most important thing that he told me that has always stuck with me are these 5 words: control what you can control. Right? You
Mhm.
can't control the game against Clemson at this moment. What you can do is you can control how you're going to play and how you're going to prepare and what your mindset is going to be against Auburn, right? And I know these players because 90% of them were coached by Bobo. I know they don't want to lose to Bobo. I know that for a fact, right? They're going to do whatever they can to make sure that Bobo does not get the better hand. They don't want Bobo to be at their program for a year, because what Bobo did was kind of messed up. They don't want Bobo to be there for a year, leave and go to a better school and then beat them with his new school. That's coming at their pride. And these players have a lot of pride. I know I played with a good amount of the players, majority of the older guys. Those guys have a lot of pride. And they're not just gonna fall asleep and let Mike Bobo run all over them and do whatever he wants to do to them. They're gonna have a vengeance, and they're gonna want some revenge on him because he did not handle everything the right way. Everyone has their own career and everyone makes their own choices, and his choices are his choices. And I don't really, you do what you got to do. But at the end of the day, like the way things happen, I know that put a salty taste in some of those players' mouth, and I know they're going to be locked in, and they're going to worry about Auburn this week because that's all they can control. And they're not going. No one gives a shit about Clemson until after the Auburn game in that program.
And the last thing I'll ask you going off from that, obviously you played for Will Muschamp, but talk us through what it's like when you know there's going to be questions about maybe one of your former coaches. He's on the other side because it happens, right? It's college football.
Yeah.
Coaches hop around. The circumstances are always different. We know the circumstance with this case in particular and how that went down, at least publicly. We don't know everything
Yeah.
that went from behind closed doors. But I say all that because as players, is that something that gets brought up by the head coach? Is that something that gets brought up by one of the sports information directors in terms of prepping you guys, or is that one of those things that you're just prepared for and you try to do everything you can when you do go out there not to give some bulletin board material because
Mhm.
there's GAs or other people with Auburn that their job is to just monitor what is being said during
Right.
those press conferences for USC for the week?
Well, I think it depends on the player. There's some players who like making that, who like put that information out there, and they want to use that as motivation because they want, in this case, it would be they would want Mike Bobo to know that they're putting a circle around this week because they want to handle things the way they want to handle things. Me personally, I just, I let my on the field stuff do the talking, so I wouldn't really say a lot. There was one or two times in my career where I accidentally did say something, and I definitely saw the repercussion of that. But it really just depends on the person. I know Shane Beamer. I don't know, but I assume that Shane Beamer would say one or two things. But really, in my past of playing college football, it would have been more so like the position coach kind of chirping a little bit and saying some side language, and just kind of using that as a little motivation to kind of say, hey, listen, like, this isn't just a regular game. Like, you're playing against somebody who left you for somebody better, right? Everyone's had a girlfriend who's left them for a better dude, right? Or had a boyfriend who's left them for a better girl, right? So, and you know how that feels on the inside, and if you can use that and you can hone that in for motivation, I think that's going to be huge. But it does depend on the person. So, but it's case by case.
Sometimes it's not better. Sometimes it's just a good honeymoon, and then the marriage falls apart. So we'll see
Right,
how
that's
that plays out. He's Jacob August. Appreciate you guys tuning in for this week's edition of Mix in a Water. We have a big one coming up next weekend to get you geared up for the Clemson USC game. It is back. It was denied last year, but you know what? It is back in our lives, and we will get you geared up for that one next week. But one game at a time. South Carolina taking on Auburn this Saturday night at Williams-Brice Stadium under the lights. A tremendous opportunity once again for USC to go bowling and become bowl eligible for the first time since 2018. We'll do it again next week right here on Gamecock Central.
Go Cox.